Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1287, 1287, December the 7th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so I just wanted to do a quick video here. It's a Sunday afternoon and I assume many of you watched Trump's speech down in Georgia. And I think it was a really incredible speech. And so I want to talk about what my main takeaway from it was, aside from the fact that he went down there to try to push for Perdue and Lefler to try to get people to say, yeah, you know, we're working on the rigged election I just went through. They'll probably rig this one too, but you got to get out and vote. He's out there trying to get Lefler and Perdue reelected to stop the Democrats from taking over the Senate. And I understand that point completely. However, I think there's another side to that. But I think I want to talk about something that became apparent to me, and I think probably extremely apparent to both Lefler and Perdue, to the establishment so-called Republicans, from that speech last night. You know, when Lefler and Perdue came up on stage, it was, you know, I mean, it was very uncomfortable. You could actually see that they were uncomfortable. They know that all those people, and there was a huge crowd there to see Trump. They know all those people came to see Trump. They know that Trump is the so-called Republican Party. And they know that they are not liked by Trump's supporters. They know they are deep state operatives, part of the Uniparty. And everybody knows the game, okay? So it's not like there's any secrets going on. All those people out there in the audience know exactly what's going on. They don't like Lefler and Perdue, don't trust them. But yet they understand, just like Trump understands, that that there's actually something that could be worse than Lefler or Perdue, and that would be the two Democrats running, because that would give Schumer and the Democrats pretty much control of the Senate, assuming that Trump is not sworn in on January 20th, and I am not so sure that that's not going to happen. Certainly Trump made it perfectly clear last night that he is in no way, shape, or form quitting, rolling over, or anything else. He believes he won the election, and he did. And he believes, if you watched the speech last night, he believes he is going to be not, sworn in on January 20th as the 46th president. So, and that's what should happen. But we're dealing with the deep state. But I think the biggest message that came out of last night is that you have to have a lot of Republicans in the establishment and the establishment in general watching what happened last night. And as Perdue, I mean, Lefler, she was, I mean, you could see literally, she got up on that stage, and as soon as she got the microphone in her hand, she could feel the negative energy coming from the crowd. You can feel energy coming from a crowd. Take it from a musician who's played in front of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. You feel the vibe and the energy coming from the crowd. You know when they're not digging you, and you know when they are digging you, okay? You know it very well. It's an energy. You can't put your finger on it. You can't describe it in any way. It is an energy. You feel it and you know it when you see it. Any of you who've ever been in front of a large crowd of people before as a musician or as a speaker or in any other situation, maybe in athletics or something, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is an energy, and you can feel it, and you know if it's positive or negative. You could see that when Lefler got the microphone in her hand, she was very tense. She couldn't even keep her thoughts together. She normally is very coherent and can speak very well. You could see that she was so rattled that she couldn't even keep her thoughts together. She was not, you could see she was not comfortable at all. She was picking up that massive negative energy vibe of people whose thoughts are, oh, there's Kelly Lefler. Unfortunately, we have to vote for that bitch. Okay? We know she's an anti-Trumper. We know she's a deep stater. We know she's going to sell us out. But the alternative is someone that's probably even worse off than her, or worse than her. Someone, and you would be giving, assuming Biden is sworn in, you would be giving the radical left the entire government, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. And that's a frightening thought for a lot of people. But you can see that Lefler was definitely not received well, and she knew it. She looked kind of terrified, to be quite honest with you. Is how she looked at me. Very, very uncomfortable. And then Perdue is liked even less than her. And he got the microphone in his hand, and he wanted to give some spiel. But the crowd wouldn't let him even get his spiel out. They started chanting, "Fight for Trump, fight for Trump, fight for Trump," as soon as he took the microphone. And the entire time he was trying to get them to quiet down so he could give his spiel, they were getting louder and louder and louder. They were about to drown him out. It actually forced him to whatever it was he was going to say, that he was prepared to say, he had to just stop. And he wasn't up there very long at all. He didn't even get into his spiel. Lefler kind of haphazardly got through her spiel, but she ended it quicker, than she wanted as well. I think both of them were supposed to get, a good 5 minutes each, maybe longer. Lefler was lucky to get off that stage before she got booed off the stage or shouted down. She felt the groundswell coming, and she got rid of the microphone real quick and got off the stage. Purdue took the microphone second, so they had already started the chant, and he couldn't even get. I bet he didn't have the microphone for 30 seconds. And he tried 3 or 4 times to calm the crowd so he could give his spiel, and they just kept getting louder, fight for Trump, as they were shouting, "Fight for Trump." And he was not even able to even get into his spiel. He was literally off the stage. It was very, very uncomfortable. Now, this sent an extremely powerful message to the establishment. They know exactly what they're looking at. They know exactly what they're looking at. Because it is now as clear as it's ever been, not just to you and to me and to Trump supporters. And remember, Trump supporters, there's a lot of Democrats and independents who are part of that crowd. It's become clear now more than it's ever been at any time during Trump's presidency. That's why this whole voter election fraud coup plot, may have really, really backfired, because if anything, it has galvanized Trump's base, which includes a lot of Democrats and independents. Galvanized them. They've been through the Russia witch hunt, they went through the Mueller witch hunt, they went through the Ukraine impeachment witch hunt, and now all previous coup attempts, and now they get the election coup attempt. They've had it. Trump supporters, probably most of whom are Republicans, but also Democrats and independents too, are so galvanized at this point that they're no longer even pretending that they associate or are warm to people with an R after their name. What this means is that Trump has now put us in a situation where it is crystal clear that the two parties that now we have in American politics, we no longer have a Republican and Democratic Party. I think that event last night in Georgia made this perfectly clear. There is no longer a Republican and Democrat Party. There are two parties. One is the Uniparty, and the other is the Trump Party. And the Trump Party is going to continue to grow and grow. It's not going away. Neither is Trump. If they thought that cheating him out of this election would get rid of him, they're wrong. And I'm not so sure that he isn't going to pull this thing out. He's going to fight to the very last breath. And he's got over 70 million people fighting with him. And it puts the Uniparty in a very, very difficult situation, because they cannot allow themselves to be exposed as a Uniparty to the masses. They have to continue to try to run this Republican versus Democrat phony hoax, as they've been doing for hundreds of years. They have to continue to run this. And Trump is just obliterating it. He is absolutely obliterating this false paradigm, this false narrative that there's a Republican and Democrat Party when there is not. There is now a Uniparty and a Trump Party. And that scares the hell out of them. Because while they may feel like they can get rid of Trump, they can't. He's already had too much of an impact. And even if they could get rid of him, his supporters and the people who agree with his policies and ideology are not going away. They're not going away next year. They're not going away in 2022 or 2024 or 2028. It is a completely new landscape politically for the next 50 to 100 years because of Trump. And that has got to have the Uniparty, the deep state, shaking in their shoes. They realize now that Trump was around for way too long, If they could have gotten rid of him in the first 90 days, the first 6 months or something like that, maybe they could have headed this off. But he was allowed to be president for too long. He was allowed to do too many good things policy-wise, and was able to show too much of a contrast between the standard uniparty politician and a real honest American who is looking out for the country and particularly the working class. Trump represents the working class, which has not been represented in a very long time. So this has got to scare the hell out of the uniparty. And as every day more and more evidence comes in, it is getting harder and harder for the uniparty and their comrades in the mainstream media, the big social media giants and all the rest. It's getting harder and harder for them to continue the narrative. They've already had to back away from the narrative now to several degrees, but pretty soon it's going to be impossible. And they're going to have to admit it, that there was serious election fraud and that this contest has not been decided. It's still up in the air. And I believe, as I said in my last video, I believe that they just need to get one good court ruling from the Supreme Court to give these state legislatures what they need to make their move. Now, some of them have already certified, and a couple more will certify this coming week. In fact, by the end of this week, I fully expect most of these to go ahead and certify. But that is not the end all. That can be, that can be undetermined. They can be uncertified. It can all be blown up. One good ruling from the Supreme Court can blow the whole thing up. And the fact of the matter is, Trump supporters are being patient and they're allowing the process to play itself out. But if we get to that point where the process has played itself out and there are no more cards to play, and they do make Joe Biden the next president, that is when the shit is going to begin to hit the fan. Because Trump supporters are not just going to suck it up and go away quietly. No, they're not going to do that. And Trump isn't going to do that either. In fact, here's what very likely could happen. Here's a couple scenarios. Trump could go back down to Mar-a-Lago and he could continue on. He could start campaigning for 2024 the day after Biden is sworn in. And he will control all of those people who the Republicans are counting on to win in 2022 and in 2024. Well, Trump could literally, there is no more Republican Party. If you want to say there is a Republican Party, it's the Trump Party. The Republican Party's gone. I hate the Republican Party. I left the Republican Party in 2002 and have never looked back. And Trump, Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012 is the reason I voted Republican. And not for the Republicans, but for Ron Paul. And Trump is the reason I voted Republican in 2016 and did again in 2020. Not for Republicans. Most of the Republicans, including almost all the Republicans in my state, are uniparty. We have a couple guys, Jim Jordan here in Ohio. There's a local representative up down in Cincinnati. He's pretty good. But 90% of the so-called Republicans, including our senators in Ohio, are uniparty. They're not, conservative. They're not out for the working class. They're bought and paid for uniparty politicians who we despise. So I think that there is the possibility that Trump can take this party wherever he wants it. It's his party. Just even if they succeed, even if they succeed in this coup, this election coup, and they don't swear him in as the next president of the United States, that doesn't end it. He just goes, he and his supporters are going to stick together. And the Republicans will find themselves with a huge hole that they can't fill because they're not the reason for any of their success. Trump is the reason for all their success. And they've now been exposed. And so that is one scenario. Trump could literally take what used to be called the Republican Party, which is now the Trump Party. He could now take his Trump Party and he can run the show from Florida. He can affect legislation. He can affect votes. He can affect elections. He is the 200-pound gorilla in the room that just is not going to go away, will not go away. His supporters are not going to leave him, and he's not going to leave them. I mean, that's a unit now. That's 70 some odd million so-called Republicans, and remember, a lot of those people are Democrats and independents, and that number will grow. That number will grow. So whether or not he's sitting in the White House or whether he's sitting down at Mar-a-Lago, he's still going to be in control of the Trump party, which includes a lot of Democrats and independents and former Republicans. And that was made perfectly clear last night. And it has to scare the hell out of the establishment as they now realize you can get rid of Trump, but you really can't get rid of Trump. You know, you can take Trump out of D.C., but you can't take D.C. out of Trump. It's too late now. The country is already galvanized with Trump, and if Republicans, so-called Republicans, part of the Uniparty, do not fight for Trump in this election, they are going to be absolutely despised. This will never be forgotten by any of these people across the country of how the representative or their senator did or did not fight for Trump. They're not going to forget this. And, you know, I think you could see like a Trump version of the resistance. Trump and 72 million of his fans can make life very, very difficult on the Republican part of the Uniparty. And they will. They absolutely will. There'll be no Republican leadership in Washington. The leadership will be coming out of Mar-a-Lago with Trump. So he owns this party. There is no Republican Party anymore. It's the Trump Party. They might as well change the name from Republican to Trump Party. And then everyone else is in the Uniparty, regardless of whether they have an R or a D after their name. And again, this has to scare the hell out of the establishment. Has to scare them to death, because they realize they've lost control of this thing. There is no way for them to get a handle back on it. And so either they abandon Trump, which is what most of them are doing now. I mean, you literally have Perdue, the day before Trump is coming down to Georgia to try to pull his chestnuts out of the fire and save his sorry ass. The day before that, he's doing an interview where he essentially says that, well, it would actually be good with Joe Biden because, you know, when Trump was there, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats wouldn't negotiate at all. We couldn't get anything done through the Congress. So at least with Joe Biden, we can all meet in the middle. We can hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And now we can all get along and get shit done. Wrong. Yeah, and the type of shit they want to get done is selling us to China, raising our taxes, and all the other garbage that we'll probably get. He essentially was saying that we would be better off. He's talking about Republicans. We'd be better off with Biden than Trump because Nancy Pelosi won't deal with Trump. Well, you know, the correct solution to that is that you get rid of Pelosi, not Trump. That's the point. You get rid of Pelosi, not Trump. They're not fighting to get rid of Pelosi. They're fighting to get rid of Trump. Republicans. Very ones who are depending and counting on Trump to come down and save their ass. Now, there's a part of me that wants to say, you know what? We should boycott that election. Go ahead and let the Democrats take over the Senate. Let Lindsey Graham and all his buddies be in the minority for a change. Go ahead and put Schumer in charge. Only thing that's going to do is highlight how radically crazy these people are. Go ahead and give the Democrats full control of everything. Biden, Pelosi, and Schumer. Let them run the damn country for 2 years. The blowback from that will be so massive that they will absolutely lose the House by a large number of seats in 2022, in which case the Republicans could come in, hopefully Trump-type Republicans could come in and shut them down so they can't do any more damage. And, of course, the Democrats will be defending twice as many Senate seats in 2022 as the Republicans, so they could come and grab up, 6 or 8 Senate seats in 2022, lose 2 of them in 2020, because really, they're not going to have that much of a majority anyway. They talk about, well, it's going to come down to 2 seats, Lefler and Perdue. Well, no, not really, because you've still got Murkowski, Collins, and Romney. How are you going to account for those 3? They're going to vote with Democrats most of the time. They're going to vote with Democrats most of the time. That's the 3 Republican votes they need to do whatever they want to do. The only thing is that they won't control the Republicans will still control the committees. But what have they done? They've been in control of the committees now for 4 years. What have they done? So I don't really see. I almost think there's an upside. It would be painful for 2 years. But don't forget, a lot of the stuff that they might try to do that's so hard left, the Democrat Party knows is unpopular. The Uniparty knows is unpopular. Do you think that they're really going to go for a big gun grab? They might try to raise some taxes on some guns and parts of guns, things like that. But do you think they're really going to go for it? I don't think so. I don't think that they'll try to do as far left as the far left of the party wants to go, because it's political suicide. So this idea that they want us to believe that if Lefler and Perdue lose, that in 2 years the Democrats are going to do so much damage it can never be undone. That's just bullshit. Anything that they could possibly do in 2 years could easily be done 2 years later. It could be undone. So I'm not so sure that we shouldn't let him take back the Senate. But I could go either way, because I don't see that big of a difference between the two. What I hate seeing is how many of these Republicans are not fighting for Trump. They shouldn't even be talking about a Biden administration. And the Senate is horrible. At least in the House, you still have, quite honestly, the majority of House members, Republicans, are sticking mostly with Trump. I think you only had like 25 or 30 Republican House members that have come out and said, yeah, Trump should step aside and let Biden come in and the election's over. Only about 25 or 30. The overwhelming majority, 160, 170 Republicans in the House are still basically saying, hey, we're not talking about a Biden administration. This election's still being contested. And we think that Trump won the election. And if justice is done, if the courts make the right calls, talking about the Supreme Court, makes the right calls, if the state legislatures and if the Republicans in Congress do the right thing, Trump will be, sworn in for a second term. So, we have a pretty good numbers in the House from this last election. And we're going to win back the House in 2022, especially if the Democrats controlled all three branches and started going to the radical left. I don't think they'll go that far to the left, but they'll go farther to the left than most people want them to go. Enough to put them in serious trouble in 2022. So I think that there's two ways to look at that. But again, the overall big takeaway is that from Trump's speech in Georgia is that he's fighting like hell, and he's going to fight to the very last breath. He believes he won the election, and he believes he is going to be successful, and he is going to be sworn in. If you watch the speech, that's basically what he's saying, is I believe that I am going to be sworn in for my second term because I won the election, and I believe we're going to prove it. He said we just need, one good judge with some courage, or a couple judges with courage to do the right thing, and he's absolutely right. And once we get to the Supreme Court, we know that we've got at least 4, maybe 5 pretty damn solid judges. And so forget about all these decisions that have been made at the state level by the appeals courts or even by the state Supreme Courts. Forget all that. That's not the end of that's not the last word on the subject. The last word on the subject will be the Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, and we'll see what they have to say. And again, I don't think that they have to make a ruling that overturns the election, because it would be hard to do, because you would need more than one state. You would need Pennsylvania and a couple other states. And I'm not sure that the Supreme Court's going to get a case that's looking at the whole picture. I think they're going to get a state-by-state case to rule on. But they could make a ruling, say in the case of Pennsylvania or Georgia, they could make a ruling that would set a precedent in all the other states. See, they don't have to make a ruling in all the states. They don't have to make a ruling in one state, which would set a precedent for the other states. It could be a positive ruling that allows members of Congress or even some of these state legislatures to say, wait a minute, we got this ruling from the Supreme Court, and based on that, in all these other states, based on that, I think that we need to go this direction, which is we need to pull back all of our electors and not send any electors, which deprives both candidates from getting 270, and then it goes into the Congress to be decided there. And after a Supreme Court ruling positive to Trump, it would shift the momentum. It'll be a huge momentum shift on top of the momentum shift that we've been seeing over the past 5 to 7 days based on some of the newest evidence that has come out. So I think in the last 5 to 7 days, particularly the last 5 to 7 days, I think the momentum has shifted. I think things are moving our way. And really, we have until January the 6th. January the 6th. And what do you think is going to happen between now and January 6th? Do you think that there's going to be more evidence of election fraud or less evidence of election fraud coming forward? I believe that there'll be more evidence of election fraud. The momentum will continue to shift. And the pressure, now that they've seen what happened in Georgia, and they saw the cold shoulder that Lefler and Perdue were given, I think it's perfectly clear now to the Uniparty and to the establishment that you are not going to get rid of Trump. I mean, it's not going to happen. And the Republican Party could be looking at, I mean, it's the Republican Party right now that is sucking wind the most, because at least the Democrats can look at the situation and go, okay, we just have to continue to divide, conquer and divide. We just have to continue to galvanize and divide the country. That's what the Democrats do. And Trump actually helps them to do that because he's the perfect villain. So they can continue to use Trump as the villain and continue to practice the politics of division to try to divide and conquer. But it leaves the Republican Party out in the cold. They have nowhere to go. Trump owns the Republican Party. He is the Republican Party. It isn't even the Republican Party anymore, it's the Trump Party. So this is I imagine a serious wake-up moment for the so-called Republican establishment. They're watching what is going on. And they realize that 95% of people who identify as Republican hate them. Hate them. They love Trump, but they hate these so-called rhinos, what people call rhinos, so-called Republicans. So I think that this dynamic has changed everything. And I think it's going to continue to work itself through. And again, we still have another month. It's not till January 6th is really the cutoff date when you actually have to, the Congress has to decide who the next president is going to be. So we still have some time, and I think this coming week we might see one of these cases at the Supreme Court. Now, I think that's the Pennsylvania case that I think was originally not brought by the Trump team, but they have now joined that lawsuit. So we will see what happens there. I think there's another 2, 3, 4 cases that could be heard, but I'm telling you, one good ruling coming from the Supreme Court will set a precedent. They don't have to have a ruling in each and every state. They have to have one ruling in one state that sets a precedent, such as you cannot use unverified ballots. Meaning if the signatures don't match, you can't do it. If they threw the envelopes away and we can't go back and match the signatures, guess what? You have to throw all those ballots out. Any ballots that were postmarked. And then you have all the fraud stuff, things that we can't sort out. And this is where the Supreme Court may come down and say, look, we can't sort this out now. We have envelopes that have been thrown out. We have claims being made that things were backdated. How do we prove that? This would require major investigations, interviewing lots of people, and trying to come up with some sort of a figure. It just isn't doable. I think that ultimately the Supreme Court could say, okay, the only thing we can say at this point is it was massive election fraud, enough to probably have affected the outcome, but we cannot go untangle it because the evidence that we need to see would either take too long to get to it all or is simply no longer available. Therefore, our recommendation is to the state legislatures that you simply not send any electors to the Electoral College this year. You simply can't do it. You cannot verify your election. You don't know who won, and you can't prove it, and there isn't time to go through and investigate it all, and you can't. The evidence is no longer there to do it. So I think a ruling like that would then apply. That would then apply to all the states that are in question, and I think it's going to be very hard to move forward in some of these states with these open cases. Because again, the federal Congress has to receive the electors and also agree with the state legislatures that there was a free and fair election. What happens if you have enough members, and I think there's going to be a good number in the House of Representatives, Republicans, it'll be all Republicans, who will say, you know, I don't think we can certify Pennsylvania's electors. I don't think we can receive Georgia's electors. They all have to be pulled out of the mix. In which case, things would be thrown into the Congress. How that proceeds, there's various opinions on that. But anyway, I think there's a lot of reason for hope, to continue to have hope. It's not fake hope. It's not hopium. It's real hope. Trump won the election in a landslide. The evidence is there. The issue is not the evidence. The issue is time. And the issue is also the process. It's the time and the process. But there's things favoring Trump at this point, and the momentum is shifting. The most important takeaway from all of this is that regardless of what happens, whichever way this goes, the goal was to get rid of Trump, and they failed. They failed. Doesn't matter if he's in D.C. or Mar-a-Lago. He ain't going away. They didn't get rid of him because it's not him. He is not the problem. Okay? It's the 70-some-odd million people who support him. And those numbers will likely grow. And so, either way you look at it, Trump wins in a lot of ways. So, stay, focused on what's going on. Stay optimistic. It's not over yet. And even if the deep state does manage to get rid of Trump and push him out of D.C., he ain't going away. His 70-some-odd million supporters are not going away. Trump and the movement lives on. It will grow stronger, and it will have a major effect on everything that happens moving forward. Just because Trump isn't there doesn't mean that Trumpism is gone. No. It'll be just as strong as ever. It's just that we won't have him in the White House leading it. But again, I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I think I think the momentum is moving our way. I think time is not going in our way. Time is tricky. But the momentum is going our way. And January 6th is the date we're looking at, not any day in December. So there is still time. There are still some who are fighting. And I think if the Supreme Court gives us one positive ruling, remember, you can't go any higher than the Supreme Court. They're the final word on the subject. One good positive ruling will set the precedent for the remaining states, and that could trigger the event that would result in Trump being sworn in and reelected as the 46th president of the United States. So keep the faith, continue to watch, and remember, regardless of what happens, we're going to win. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you guys. Bye.